that word shalom. As one scans the pages of our literature, one finds unceasing reference to peace, that word shalom. One finds constant preoccupation by our teachers and sages with the goals of peace. Peace is associated with God himself. It is his hope for mankind. It is his most precious blessing to us. When the priest, when the Kohen blesses his people, the last climatic word he says is shalom. May he grant you peace. The rabbis say that it was a blessing that contains all blessings. It is the indispensable condition for blessings. For what is there if there is no peace? There is nothing else of importance that can be found. As a matter of fact, we have two proclamations to the unity or the oneness of God. One proclamation we read tonight, Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Another one is said every Saturday morning.
I wish to speak tonight and to discuss and sermonize tonight and a few other Friday nights on the questions of theology. I will speak for about 10 minutes, giving you the facts and various views in theological discourses, and then we'll have 5 minutes of discussion and questions right here from the synagogue floor. And then we'll go on with the services. Now, my friends, to theology and facts. First, what is theology? Anthropology is a study of man and man's development. Sociology is a study of man's relationship and development towards his fellow man, towards the society he lives with, the group he is with, the environment, or the nation that he is with. Psychology is the study and development of man towards his own self, what makes him tick, and why he does things in a certain way and why he reacts to certain things. Psychiatry, of course, is that study of when the tick starts to cuckoo instead of to tick. And theology is the study of man's development and relationship to God, and indeed his ideas of God's relationship and development towards man. Now, my friends, you must understand that in the studies of anthropology and sociology, or psychology or psychiatry, one can make experiments. You can see facts, you can see results, you can come up with theories and prove or disprove the theory. You can make scientific and laboratory experiments. History can bear witness to situations. You can change results and change environments and change attitudes and record what they are. This, of course, is not possible in the study of theology. We have no such thing as proof or facts in any question of theology. How can we have an experiment to prove or bring in a laboratory result to such questions as what is God, when did he start, and why was the world created, and what are we to him? We cannot have any facts or proof or any experimental results or theories that can be proven or disproven in such questions as what do we mean by free will? Why is there pain and suffering on this world? Why do such things as hurricanes and earthquakes come about? Why is there evil and good? Why is there quite often more evil on this world, even in a natural form, rather than from man to man, than good on this world? Do we believe in angels? What is death? Is there life after death? What do we mean when we say man is created in the image of God? Or such questions as what is the soul? And what is immortality? What are we after death when we say our soul lives on? Do we believe in resurrection? Whether it be resurrection of the spirit or resurrection of the body. And we have in our prayer book the prayer Machaye Hamesim, who gives life to the death. What do we mean by that? Do we believe in heaven and in hell? And so on and so forth of so many theological questions. And I believe that these are questions that the Jew today has a right to ask, and certainly should demand some sort of understanding. Now, all these questions do not have any real factual answers, but there is belief in these and various degrees of attitudes towards these beliefs. In other words, my friends, theology is based upon religious dogma, upon religious questions that one says we have no answer but belief. Man's relationship to God has as its first premise faith. The I believe, that I believe there is a God, and then we go on from there to other dogmas, to other questions of theology that one says, I just believe. Maimonides, the Rambam, comes up with 13. And he says there are 13 dogmas or 13 questions of faith that one must believe to be considered Jewish. As an example, I believe that a Messiah must come. I believe in life after death. I believe in resurrection, he says, and so on. I believe that Moses was the greatest prophet ever that literally spoke to God. 13 of them. Malachi, the prophet, says 3 Jewish dogmas are enough. Others argue even with Maimonides and present many more dogmas or religious theological beliefs that one must have to consider himself to be Jewish. But the beauty, my friends, of Jewish theology is that Judaism gives you the basic I believe, the basic theology. How you wish to interpret this question of belief or this dogma to make it suit yourself is perfectly permissible in Judaism. Or even to throw it out completely. As we just said, Maimonides says there are 13. Malachi, 3. Others say many more, and others argue there are less than 13. You can throw it out completely, except one belief, the belief in God. That there is a God, and that God did not just create the world and went away, but he is continuously here with us. How far our concept is in God, what we think about God, what relationship about God, this again, each individual can have his own attitude and his own dogma or his own stage or development of this belief, just as long as you believe there's a God. For an example, whether we believe there are angels existing or no angels existing makes no difference. Whether one would believe that literally our Bible speaks of angels and there are super or semi-spiritual creatures called angels. Others may say no. All the angels spoken in our Bible are just figmentations of the mind. They are imaginary. Others may say no, what it means is only expression of a messenger. It could be the water when the water floods and destroys a home, that the water is the angel, the water is the messenger of destruction that God sent out. Or whether you don't believe in it altogether, makes no difference. Trias hamesim. Do we believe in resurrection of the body, whether you do believe in it or you don't believe in it, or whether you have some sort of categories of your belief, you believe only the spirit will live again, perhaps come back, never the body, whatever. You are still a good Jew. This, of course, is not true to Christian belief. In Christianity, you've got to believe in the Trinity, otherwise you're not a Christian. There are certain particular dogmas that you must believe in, not only to believe that there's one God. For instance, you must believe Jesus is the Son of God, otherwise you're not a Christian. And that he's a Savior, etc. This does not hold true. Whether one believes Moses, for instance, is the greatest prophet or not, whether he believes the Torah was written by hand by Moses or written by God and handed to Moses, makes no difference. As long as he believes there's a God in heaven, he is Jewish. And all the other dogmas, all the other theological questions, you can interpret any which way you want to. And now, my friends, we shall discuss these theological dogmas, or beliefs, or faiths, or interpretations that our Jewish people have today and have indeed had throughout the ages. And by the way, we will find that just as people change, and just as history changes as time goes by, just like outlook changes and attitude changes and society changes and geographical environment changes and fashion changes and hairdressers changes and your style of your dress and clothes change, so do these dogmas or theological outlooks or theological questions and answers. And of course, to each his own outlook and belief. In theology, no one can say my understanding is right and yours is wrong. Each one may say mine is right, and as long as it makes you better by believing what you believe in, then you, of course, must believe in that. We have no way to say you are wrong, and we have no way to say you are right. My friends, the first theological question I choose to discuss is, what is our belief in a heaven and hell? Do we believe in it? And in what manner? What does our tradition say? Now first, let me tell you this. We do not find any mention of a heaven or hell, or any manner of a hereafter in Torah Moshe, in the 5 books of Moses. Oh, there is mentioned Sheol. If a person dies, Vayered Sheolah. He went down to Sheol. And Sheol is literally something like a grave, or as a place for the dead, but nothing more. In fact, the expressions of death used in our Torah were ve'eineno, and behold, he is not here anymore, because God took him. Or we find expressions vayosifu el amov, vayosef el amov, and he went back to his people, or he was gathered unto his people, meaning perhaps gathered into the same place the others go, death. But no mention whatsoever of what happens afterwards, that there's a reward and punishment and a place to come, that there is eternity of one's soul, certainly not that there is a resurrection of a soul returning. Now, suppose you would say maybe Moses or the people at that time of the writing of the particular 5 books of Moses had no idea or concept of a heaven or hell or hereafter. No, my friends, this is not true. Because Moses certainly knew of a heaven and hell concept. After all, he lived among the Egyptians, and the Egyptians mummified. They even buried treasures with their dead, and pots and pans and food and ships and so on, so that they should have it in the world to come hereafter to go travel. So there was a concept of a hereafter and of a punishment in a heaven and a hell. Oh yes, my friends. We do find a concept of reward and punishment in our Torah. In fact, we read it tonight. But what is this concept? V'hoyo im shemoa tishmuel mitzvosai, and it shall be that if you will listen to my commandments, the rain will give its rain in time, and you will have food in time, and you will have the grain in time, and the animals will give birth to its young, and so on. And if God forbid not, then you will be punished, there will be no rain, you will be chased from the land, and so on. There is reward and punishment all through our Torah. It is, however, on this world. And so we see that as far as Torah Moshe is concerned, as far as the 5 books of Moses, reward and punishment on this world, and there's no mention whatsoever of a heaven or a hell. I will now entertain questions, and next time we will continue with this question. Shabbos, Parshas Bamidbar. Just this past Sunday, we all celebrated Mother's Day. And indeed, in a sense, we pay homage to the woman of the house. But I feel, however, that Mother's Day and this season of honor to mothers and fathers means that not only are we to honor our mothers, the rearers and bearers of children, and our fathers, the upholder of the economics of the home, but rather to give honor to the home itself, to understand the relationship between mother and father, between wife and husband, son and daughter, between sister and brother, and indeed to reflect in our hearts and minds marriage and what holiness of marriage should mean to us. In fact, my friends, I feel that there is no better way to really honor your mother and your father than to reflect love and reverence for the entire group we call our family, the mishpacha. And the word family and the word mishpacha means a lot to the Jew. How often do we find in our Bible, mishpachas hakahosi, mishpachas hahoveni, mishpachas hashemi? They are mentioned as the family of Reuven, the family of Shimon, the family of Levi. As a family group, there is something to be proud of in that particular unit. And as for the woman of the family, don't feel you ladies are being neglected in honor, because God himself pays honor to her. As our Talmud says, it is only for the wife's sake that a man's house is blessed. I am reminded of a story of a woman telling another friend of hers that her husband and I, she says, are both alike. We like the very same things. The only trouble is I like to spend it and he likes to save it. Now, my friends, what does holiness of marriage mean to us? First, where do we come across the expression of marriage? In our Bible it is written, and the Lord said, Lo tov hayes hodom lavado, it is not good for man to be alone. Al kein ya'azov ish es aviv es imo, v'yivdok v'ishto. Therefore shall man leave his father and his mother, and shall become one with his wife. First and foremost, we find already an expression of leaving. You go away from the family you were with, from your father and mother, and also the expression of cleaving, becoming as one with the one you will be married. Beginning of a new start. Our Talmud states, he who lives without a wife doesn't really know the joy of life. And as we choose our life's mate, as we pledge the pursuit of his or her happiness as the main goal of our life, and as we pledge the pursuit of bringing up family and rearing our children, and seeing a family go again and a growth of a tree start into its new fruits, we broaden and deepen the sense of our interest. We become at once happier and more precious. Now, my friends, the Hebrew word for marriage is kiddushin, taken from the word kodosh, which means holy. It is not merely an agreement between two people. It is not a simple contract, but to the Jew it is a sacred contract. The Orthodox have their weddings, their chuppah, under the stars in the skies above. Outside, symbolic that the heavens above are here witnessing this sacred contract. And how often do we have our weddings, our chuppah, in a synagogue, in a house of holiness, symbolic again that the covering above our heads is the coverings of God's hands blessing this both and sanctifying this marriage and saying, indeed, I am making this contract holy to himself. To us, my friends, marriage is more than a biological record. Our Torah has a large list of begats that are fameless because all they did was only begat. And nor is marriage a mere economic commitment. In fact, our sages teach that children who are born into a marriage de convenience are often misfits socially, psychologically, ethically, and morally. And we can readily understand why. If children don't see love between their own father and mother, but they see that they just got married so they could live with each other and get away from what they had before, they lose psychologically, and they find morally and ethically their lives completely as misfit. Indeed, when a Jew is married, he literally accepts the word for marriage, kiddushin, holiness, reverence. For that word implies what marriage should be. What is needed throughout family life is reverence, to look up with respect and revere the partner's personality. And personality is the crown of all the qualities and assets of a person. It is the infinite well of goodness, of truth and beauty that a human may develop into. To revere your partner's personality, to understand he also has a way to say what he wishes and has a beauty within himself or herself. This, first and foremost, is your understanding when you marry. In marriage, you take two different personalities, different people, and put them together as one. And you need to start out with kiddushin, with reverence for each other's feelings. Without such reverence, the marriage ceremony becomes an empty ritual. A family may inhabit an apartment, a house, but never a home. Marriage as kiddushin, as reverence, as holiness for the Jew, has as its basis appreciation of the partner's soul, of his heart, of his mind, and of his desires. Indeed, my friends, love of the physical type changes into another love. When you first met your wife, perhaps you whistled at her and thought she was beautiful. But after 3 months of marriage, certainly she's just as beautiful. But when another girl walks by, you may whistle at her. Why? Wasn't this the same one you whistled before and thought she was the most beautiful in the world? Yes. But the physical type of love changes. It changes to the family joke, to the concern, to the reverence of your others, to the feeling, to the sitting at the table, and to the walking together, to the dreams together, and to the talking of together. The second ingredient of kiddushin is righteousness. It is but a matter of righteousness that we extend generosity to our partner, to someone who is not our husbands or wives. We are righteous. We think twice. We try to find excuses for them. Why not to our partner of life? Too often do we exaggerate 2 cents worries. Too often do husband and wife misunderstand because they are unwilling to understand where the same matter they would had it been somebody else. To be righteous and just is one of the greatest ingredients of marriage. I am reminded of the story of a young man after being married 6 months, turns to his wife as a pretty girl walks by, and he says to her, "Do you see that pretty girl? She just smiled at me." And his wife said, "So what? When I first saw you, I laughed out loud." There is righteousness. But, my friends, what crowns the Jewish family, what crowns Jewish marriage, what crowns kiddushin, is not the first quality of reverence for each other's personality, nor righteousness to each other, which is quite indeed important, but the third quality, the quality of rachmanis, of mercy. And mercy, yes, but meaning literally mother love. There is something mystical in a mother's self-surrender to her baby. Mother love is a passionate desire to spend herself, what the mother knows, what the mother has, what the mother is, for the helpless infant. And this is that beautiful expression, Vahida Shemama. Now, if we take this same trait of unselfishness, and this trait is part of the formula of a marriage itself, how wonderful would that marriage be? Of course, and certainly there are disagreements, and sometimes voices are raised and tears are shed. And by the way, our Talmud tells us that God counts the tears that a wife sheds. But we find these disagreements. We found this when Abraham disagreed with Sarah. And have we not found it when Isaac disagreed with Rebekah about the kind of children they have and who's more to be loved, Esau or Jacob? We even find it between Yaakov and Rachel. And certainly I can imagine the argument that went on between Adam and Eve after Adam got himself in trouble by the apple that Eve gave him. But how far did it go? Where did the tears stop? Where did it start? Were the tears counted by God? I'm reminded of the story of a man who was at a cemetery crying so bitterly. And after a while, a friend came over to him and said, "I'm sorry, sir, that you cry so bitterly. Is this the loss of your wife that you mourn?" He says, "My wife? No. It's my wife's first husband." My friends, the family is the laboratory of social ethics and the best school for children. Basic convictions and tendencies are born and bred by nature and nurture. Psychologists have always stressed that the impact upon children is given to them during their first 5 years of life. And now, I do not want to neglect the children. There is one other important point in a good family, and that is indeed your children. The same honor that children are to give to parents should be given in proportion to your children. We are taught, Chanoch lenar al pi darko. Train your child according to his own understanding. You do not strike a 21-year-old. You can discuss with a 16-year-old. You can take a 4-year-old and show them that they too can take out dishes and set the table, and they can place the table, and they could move. Train them according to their ability, according to their wisdom, and according to their understanding. I know that children requires wisdom that will search for ever better methods. Children require patience to ignore present unpleasantness for future happiness. It requires righteousness as not to judge too severely actions of evil that they may do for how do you know what. Often we look at our children as the means of achieving an ambition for them, when their own choice in the path of life may be fine and wise or even better than ours, as long as they uphold our principles and cherish our traditions and walk in the way that you would want them to walk in righteousness and in goodness and in the ability to love human nature and human nature to love them, then we should encourage them. I'm reminded of a grandmother pushing a set of twins, and when somebody asked her, how old are they? She turned to one and she said, "Well, this doctor is 4 months old and the lawyer is 4 months and 2 days old." My friends, parental influence will be of great influence when the child has enjoyed the loving comradeship of a father and mother. In other words, good teachers as well as good parents must aim to make themselves unnecessary, especially to marry children. They're married, they left, and they have now become as one with another. On this season of Mother's Day and Father's Day, or what I'd rather call Family Day, let us resolve and remember that all the welfare of mankind depends upon the atmosphere, the attitude, the tenure of family life. The world's future rests in the last resort, not upon prosperity and depression cycles, but upon the character of its sons and daughters. Mankind's destiny will be reached or thwarted, not by the success or failure of any group of interests, but by the homes to be built, the spirit which inhabits them, and the youth which will translate it into action. Kedushin, holiness, reverence, this is the family. If God does not build thy house, in vain labor those who build it. Shabbos Parshas Noso Tavshin Chavtes. The Hebrew school year ended this past Sunday, and of course our confirmation class who just graduated this past Saturday night.
And our secular school year will be over in a week to come, and I am certain that all of us have learned more than the year gone by. We have matured more and grown in intelligence better than a year ago. And it is at this season, my friends, a season of termination and graduation, of growing into, as our bar mitzvah, growing into from childhood into manhood, and a season of entering into from secondary to university systems, or indeed from the spiritual of a youngster, entering into the fold of responsibility of a bar mitzvah. It is at this season indeed that I remind myself of the type and age of society we live in. My friends, we live in an age of question, in an age of inquisitiveness, of wanting to know why. Why do we behave in certain manners? Why is grass green, or why do apples fall down instead of up? What is beyond the earth, as our scientific astronauts have just returned this past Monday? It is a time of scientific experimentation, a revolution in physics, of transplant of human organs. It is a scientific age, an inquisitive age, an age of turmoil within the minds of the intelligentsia, and it is an age of concern and involvement, one that was unheard of to the university student and the academician. It is, I think, a liberal thinking society, not only in America, but seems all over the world. We are a little liberal. When the astronauts were up close to the moon, our world was so small, like a little speck. And when they described a bit of adverse weather with over the clouds, they did not see that very same week the adversity of riot that was going on in our very community of Greensboro. A small world. Now, my friends, it is precisely because we are part of a thinking and a moving and a scientific society that our basic element of man's spirit is pushed into the background. The basic element of man's spirit is only raised but once in a while when the spirit calls for it. And this basic element, I believe, is religion. The last thing on man's mind, religion. And because I am Jewish, I ask the modern question of what is a Jew? What does Judaism mean to me in this age of scientific research? Is it relevant to our daily life of today? As our rabbis asked long ago, Me'ayin vaso la'ayinata holech. From whence do we come, and unto where do we go? And most important, I will ask the question that my confirmation class asked, who were just confirmed last week, and that my pre-confirmation are already asking. The question that so many ask in this most liberal Jewish youngsters ask in our universities. And that question is, isn't one religion as good as another? Why do we make a whole issue about being Jewish?
One is just as good as another. They all teach to do good. Now, my friends, what is Judaism? And Dennis, I want you to listen carefully. This is not my charge to you. There will be more talk tomorrow. But listen. Judaism does not begin with faith. It ends with it. When the prophet asks, "What does the Lord request of thee?" he does not answer, "Thou shalt believe." But his reply is to do justly, to love mercy, and finally to walk humbly with God. All deeds and acts of man lead to the way of faith. This is not so by some other religions, who believe that first and foremost is believing in God, not to us. If we do good to others, if we see beauty and growth, if we see understanding and righteousness and injustice from this alone, how could you not believe there's a God in heaven? If you are that kind of a nature of a person, you will believe in faith. Do justly, love mercy, and then you will walk humbly with God. I do believe that Judaism and all its regulations and symbolisms and customs and Torah law, and Judaism and its tradition and its methods and even the Baba-Mises and its way of thanking our God, the way the Jew argues with God as he would with his own brother. How can you do this to me, God? As the Jew asks of God as if he is close to him. The way the Jew prays, if correctly interpreted, I believe that this represents the highest and noblest form of awareness and guidance. I believe this, first, because I was born into a Jewish family and to Jewish life. And second, I was taught early in life the idiom of Jewish thought and experience. And third, I was fortunate to be conditioned to behold values as a Jew. And this is true to almost all of you sitting here. You are conditioned to this. You are all born into Judaism. You all see and you all live this in your homes. Judaism became the norm, the gauge by which to judge all the things and doings of my life. And the same true to your life. In other words, my friends, I did not start from zero. I had a frame of reference which was mine, not somebody else's, but mine. This is the way I believed it went. And you, in your frame of reference from your home life, this is the way you believe Judaism is. But you had a frame of reference. And fourthly, with study and maturity, I became more convinced of Judaism's sublime character, its theological nobility, and its grandeur. And I think that here we can see the importance of your personal Jewish family life. How you act, engage your Jewish conditions, your children. And the way you talk at home, what you do at home, the way you behave on your table on the Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, or the singing, the observance of your holidays and feelings of Judaism. This conditions and influences those who are with you. And the child today is saying this very thing to us. Via protest and via demonstrations, they are saying, where is your standards that we want to see, that we want to have? Though not religious standards, whatever ethical and moral standard, where are they? The child does not see it, and I say the Jewish home quite often does not give it the spirit of Judaism as well. Now I give you, my friends, this personal journey of my religious life, because I want you to understand a second important point. Can one say that one mother is as good as another, or that one child is as good as another, or that one country is as good as another, or that one's life is as good as somebody else's life? No, my friends. My mother, or to you, your mother, is not as any other mother. My child is not just another child, and your child is no more precious to you, and mine is more precious to me. But, and this is important,
because of my reverence for my mother, because of my love for my child, because of my devotion for my country, because of my necessity to keep myself alive, and I do want to live. Childhood is precious to me, and motherhood means a lot to me, and country means a great deal to me, and life is revered to me. I can't only when one has that personal feeling, I can understand and respect yours towards your own. Only when are religiously informed, only when we understand and have true love for our faith and see beauty in our religious experience, can one truly honor and respect the right for another to believe his way, however he may differ in religious forms. Abraham, went out to convert people. He did not convert people to worship the way he worships God. That was his son Isaac that he taught. All he wished was those who bowed to stone and to wood and called them God to say, take the stone and take the wood and throw it in the trash. There is one unseen universal God who wants everybody to show justice to everybody else. And Abraham lived in a time when justice was unheard of, in the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, those two wicked cities. That is all that Abraham wanted. As long as he saw that in them, he respected them, and he will respect his own. My respect for the religion of others does not dilute my respect and devotion and dedication to my own. If it does, then it will be a grace of service. I'm reminded of the story of a man. I walked into a rabbi once, and he told the rabbi, I want you to know that I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Certainly I was born Jewish, unfortunately, and I do not believe in all the laws of the Torah. In fact, I want you to know that every single law of that Torah of yours I have already transgressed. It says you should eat kosher, I ate pig, I even killed, I raped, I stole, I murdered, I did everything. And the rabbi said, no, you didn't. There is still one that you did not do. You didn't kill yourself. It's a law in our Torah not to. Maimonides says, Rambam, thank God, he said, that Christianity is in existence. Not because Maimonides was to convert to Christianity, but because he understood that Christianity is a religion that believes in one God, that teaches goodness. And with them believing in this one God, and in them understanding it, they would let the Jew believe and worship in his own way. Maimonides, of course, saw the Inquisition a little later. Pope John, who made the first ecumenical council and the Schema Judaica, who brought about this entire new essence and feeling of Catholic and of the Indian is Buddhist religion. My friends, it is true that many who are not of the Jewish faith respect those who are. And don't we know that the worst anti-Semite is the Jewish anti-Semite? The worst anti-Semite is the one that does not respect his own, and therefore does not let his fellow Jew follow and respect whatever he wishes. I wish sometimes we would understand that and see that. And so, my friends, speaking as a Jew and for Judaism, to me, Judaism is a religion of moral choices. It's a religion of logic and reason and intelligence. It is a faith with flexibility in its rituals, adaptability and progression in its society. It is a religion which makes moral demands upon man and calls us to emulate God, not the fads and the whims of men. And thou shalt not turn unto the ones of your eyes and the wheels of your heart. It is a religion that guides and urges us to bring back that beautiful verse that God himself wrote when he created the world even before man came or before man sinned. God saw everything that he has made, and told me, and behold, it is very good. It is a religion that wants to return this expression, behold, it is very good. To me, it is a religion to make true those words of the prophets. And there shall be not hate in all God's mountain, and men shall learn war no more, and each shall sit under his fig tree and under his shade, and none shall make them afraid. Everybody in his own way, with respect to all. When to this, my friends, is added the fact that when a Jew loyally identifies himself with his ancestors' religion, he is standing in a historic continuity of over 4,000 years. His roots, then, are deep in history, and his vision is as lofty as the future.
Yes, President Kennedy laid down the challenge, and 4 assassinations later, 1 Vietnam, 8 dozen burnings, 2 dozen Columbia's, crisis in black and white, beyond Chicago, and beyond the Pentagon, and beyond the hippies and the yippies and the drugs and the dropouts and confrontation. Perhaps beyond all this, man indeed needs a cathedral of some sort to revive our faith in ourselves. Or is it only a circus? To ask, should the money have been spent on space exploration instead of, well, you fill in the blank, is the wrong question. The real question is, would the money have been spent to improve man's earth? It is said that cathedrals were undertaken to consume man's surplus energies that would otherwise have been used to wage war. Yes, many historians believe this, many philosophers. Well, better than perhaps the philosophy that the Russians and us are to race for space than for nuclear overkill. But my friends, the moon landing offers a bonus in discovery that has nothing to do with race or moon dust or circuses. The concept and the achievement prove that there is virtually nothing man cannot do if he wills it. Indeed, he is like a small god on earth. If man can fly rockets, he can eliminate pollution. If he can conquer gravity, he can conquer poverty. The question is, does he want to do so? What good is it to send a man to the moon if we are afraid to fly the face of the earth, or to have man walk the crevices, but which will hold the need to conquer cancer and to help the aged and hundreds of other priorities just as important? Beyond the conquest of outer space, we need the conquest of inner space. For we all live on a spaceship named Earth, and this necessitates as much planning and discipline as does the venture on the moon. What is it about man that compels him to build cathedrals spiraling to the sky while forgetting the needs that are to be found in his own kitchen or his own bedroom or his own bath? We have conquered the eye with the telescope. We have conquered the hand with machines. We have conquered distance with gravity. What is needed is not to thwart the space program, but to apply its techniques and management and conquer other areas on Earth. You know, our Midrash teaches us that the order in the scale of created things seems to be Moshe Kapoya. Why don't we say that man is the most important? And yet man was created last. And how beautiful they explain this by saying, inorganic substances indeed exceed plants, and plants outnumber animals, and least of all is man. This is true when we consider quantity, but in quality the order is reversed. Inorganic substances has no sign of life. Plants do live, at least in growth, and they reproduce themselves, but they lack movement. Where they are, that's where they stay. Animals reproduce themselves, they have life, and they move, but they lack intelligence. Man is the only creature of animal-like life that has also growth and reproduces and moves, but is also of the highest intelligence. For he is given dominion over the universe and space, charged with the task of making it productive. He is the genius who dreamt the dream of the ladder to heaven, having proved that what he can do can come true if he only wills it. My dear friends, bring part of that heaven down to earth. Each one of you in your own way can help to bring man back to the Garden of Eden that he was chased from. And I do not speak abstractly and to the world outside where you are not involved. For each and every one of you is involved. God created the heavens and the earth. Do you know for whom? Our Torah teaches us each man should say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, because of me and for me alone was the entire world created. I have a part and I can make it first in my little circle, among my family, and it can stretch to my block, to my area, to my community, to everyone. Let's see to it in our own little way, for it means everything. The world is mine. Let's see to it to make it a good one. Shabbos, Parshas, Noah. Shin Lamed Aleph,
1970. The Bible is a many-faceted jewel, and its luster shines on undim throughout the ages. Indeed, the Bible is many things. It is history, it is philosophy, its outlook, it is tradition, it is an ethical and moral law book. But essentially, my friends, it judges man, his thoughts and deeds, and it gives the verdict of man's yearnings. And what we read in today's Bible portion is so apropos to the thinking of man in just the past week and in the few days ahead. We read in today's Sedra, Parshas Noah. Noah is Tzadik Hayobedahosov. Noah was a righteous man in his generation. Vatimolei ha'aretz chamos, and the earth was filled with violence. The reading of the phrase B'derosov is questioned immediately with considerable discussion by our Talmud on its meaning and its intent. Why did it have to say, and Noah was a righteous man in his generation? Could it not say, and Noah was a righteous man? That one word in his generation threw a clinker in there that our sages started to wonder. And indeed there was considerable argument. Some sages say the word in his generation was to teach us that Noah was only a righteous man in that generation of violence and of no good. He was standing out. Had he been living in a generation of Abraham, where people were much better, he would have been just plain man of rank and file. Other rabbis say no, if he was such an outstanding man in a generation of lawlessness and wickedness and violence, yet he stood for what he felt was right, how much more so would he be a pillar if the generation was a righteous generation in the first place. My dear friends, a regard for our surroundings is all important. And long before sociologist David Reisman spoke of our generation as being outer-directed, influenced by our fellow man, Maimonides observed, men conform to the practice of other men in their community. His ideas and actions are influenced by others. Long ago, this philosophy was known. No wonder we pray on Rosh Hashanah not only for our individual needs and ourselves, but for the betterment of society and that environment around us. For what does it avail man to pray to God, make me righteous, and I walk out and find there's wickedness all around me, always tempting me? What good is it for a prophet to stand even in the days of prophecy and say to himself, I must be righteous, when he knows out there around him is wickedness, and therefore the prophet spoke for everyone to change, and his prayer was for the surroundings, for the environment that influences us, that we are part of. My dear friends, this past week and the week ahead of us ought to make us look up and think, are we living in the Dor HaMabul? Are we living in this generation of Noah? Vatimole oretz chomos, and the land was filled with violence. Our Talmud expresses this. This is Talmud. Our Talmud reads, in the days of Noah there was lawlessness, violence among the people, unconcerned one to the other. There were lies in every movement they made. There was war between tribes, character assassination. Rabbi Yochanan goes further, and he says it wasn't only the rank and file of the generation, but its leaders, those who people looked up to, the outer-directed, as we just mentioned, who we go after. Its leaders, said Rabbi Yochanan Medaber Sheker B'chorom, spoke lies loudly and clearly and long. Its leaders either preached injustice or turned away from justice. Either preached untruth or turned away from truth. How interesting Rabbi Yochanan says it. They gathered in groups to practice hate, to speak of murder, to talk of destruction. And I'm speaking of the generation of Noah, not the generation we're in now. Witness this small resume, my friends, of the week that just passed. The libelous, sick rhetoric of Egypt and Russia in the halls of peace, and in the halls where truth should have been spoken, in the United Nations. Rabbi Iban challenged back and said, how can we accept an agreement to negotiate while the old agreement is torn before our very eyes? Witness the week that just passed of bombings of these places of holiness in Rochester, of synagogues, for no other reason but the sick mind, perhaps a symptom of the sick society. Witness, at least for the first time, the truth coming out in the article of the papers that we've had in this local paper of the involvement of the Black Panthers and all those to the left with the Arab cause, including some sick Jewish people. This weekend, my friends, or this week that will come, will end the formal ceasefire next Thursday on November 5th, and who knows what it will bring. And this week, too, our polls are open for the privilege to elect 35 senators, 11 governors, 418 members of the House, aside from local state elections. I look at the trend of our society and I wonder, the Hamas, the violence of this week alone, including throwing stones and eggs on that man that represents a nation to the world. I wonder if they would do that if the Pope would be marching around, that who represents religion. He too represents us, no matter how our feeling is. Stoning our own president in our own land, it's enough it's done in South America. In reference to Israel, what we've heard and seen this week, the loud cries that the leaders are together calling to the world, and the problems of the falsehoods in bringing upon ourselves as Americans. It's all interrelated. The bombing of the synagogue is a symptom, not merely an incident. Whatever will happen November 5th in Israel and the Middle East is a symptom, the symptom that the United Nations has lacked in its truth. Throwing stones on the president is a symptom. Everything we see out there quite often is a symptom of a society, a sick society. The world doesn't realize if we speak just for a moment upon ourselves. We're Jews, so let's speak first our holiness, that is, our things that are considered holy to ourselves. For the Jews, Israel is a state of mind. It's not only a piece of geography, it's a theology, it's a history, it's a memory. It's a Jewish tears, a Jewish triumph, it's Jewish anguish, and Jewish ecstasy. It is childhood legends and biblical verses, it's direction that we pray, and is where we turn in our prayers. We know what it is and we try to tell this to the world. But the radical left and the bombers of universities and even religious leaders of other faiths in the entire world don't see this and don't realize it. I've never seen or heard of any electioneering of the caliber that has been going on recently. It is clear that the tactics have deepened the divisions and anxieties of our people and infuriated many. The captains is exploiting fears of the people. The campaign of this year is. It's become a political or politics of fear, as we've read. Yes, my friends, there is a sense of loneliness in this country, even of helplessness and doubt about the fidelity of our institutions. If you'd only read James Reston's column a few days ago, he says this. But vote we must, and choose in your heart when you feel is not acting out of hummus, out of wirelessness, out of lawlessness, out of that outer directive that we will look upon for inner directive for himself. Now I say all this, my friends, not to give you an outline and brief of the news of the week, or to elaborate frustrations, or make this pulpit into a gripe session, not at all. But I say this because there is a lesson to be learned that this world of violence was destroyed by God, and a dove brought back a fig, which was a sign of life. A rainbow crossed the sky to proclaim a world of justice. There is good and love and art in their society as well. There were Nobel Prize winners after all. By the way, 5 of them of the Jewish faith. The point is, as Jews and indeed as people, we ought to not forget, as the Jewish poet once wrote and prayed. He said, "O God, give us the strength to hate." We had more than enough reasons. It was only strength that the Jew always lacked. 2,000 years of persecutions have failed to prepare the Jewish mentality for hate. Had only immuned it against hate. Jewish history is full of examples, my friends, from Akiva to Hillel to Zeitlin, of how the Jews have always been able to meet beast with man.
Perhaps had we learned to hate more during the years of ordeal, fate itself would have been fright, would have taken fright. The Germans did their best to teach us, but we were poor pupils in the discipline of hate. Indeed, my dear friends, I cry out with all my heart against silence. Every Jew somewhere in his being should set apart a zone of hate, healthy, virile hate, for what the Germans personified, for what the Egyptians are doing, for what Russian pact means, for what the bombing of synagogues tell us. And as Jews, there is another exciting dimension to our experience as human beings. Our ancestors visited the temple 3 times during the year. We ought to seek the stimulation of a visit to the land of Israel. It is refreshing for an individual who lives a smug life to go out and see the pioneering society, to witness Jewish idealism in action. We can also seek for the inspiration which comes to any Jew when he appears in a house of worship, finding the emotional excitement of prayer and the spiritual stimulation of the service. We can, and we must change chamas to somach. We began with the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, and we end the Sedra with the Dor Abraham, for the generation of Abraham. What society would you be part of? What generation would the outer directed influence of your children be? The generation of Abraham as it ends, or the generation of the flood as it began? My dear friends, it depends upon you. Shabbos, Parshas Vayetze, Tov Shin Lamed Aleph, 1970. In this season that our Christian friends call the season of peace on earth and goodwill to men, I could not help but to contemplate the irony of today's Sedra to today's times. Our Torah begins with the first exile, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, and Yaakov went out from Beersheba. He was running in fear from his own brother.
He dreams. He dreams of angels, and God himself says, Hine Enochi imcha v'shmarticha. Behold, my son Jacob, though you are in exile, though you run, though you are persecuted, God says, I am with you, and I will guard you. Kilo azveko, because I shall not leave you. Ashivoso Elohadomo, and he makes a promise to Jacob, and he promises him, and I shall return you to this land that you are running from. And our sages teach us it was not only a promise to return to the land, but I shall return you to the dignity, to the honor, to the truth that you have been chased from. Even in exile, even in running from his life and for his life, not knowing what the night would bring, what pogrom has been hatched against him, what day they would declare a massacre. Even in exile, he too made a promise. Jacob awoke from that dream, and he said the words that we find so often upon the entrances of sanctuaries, graved on stone. Jacob declared, Manoah hamokom hazeh. How awesome is this place! This is the place that God must dwell. And he called that place the place where the Jew treads. They say, House of God, Bethel. And he too made a promise. And he says unto God, on a condition, mind you. He says unto God, Vishafti v'shalom, if you will return me in peace to my home, if you will return me in peace to the dignity that I and what I represent shall truly be. And if you do this for me, and I quote our Bible, then, as Jacob said, then shall the Lord be my God. If not then, he is not my God. And God kept this dream. Our dear friends, this dream of returning, this hope of the be unto me a holy people, this dream of Jacob always stayed. That time, the trickery of Laban's of the world, the love of Rachel and the love he had for all the people, and the final encounter with Esau are all history repeating itself today. The encounters of Esau, the trickery of the Labans, the love of Israel to truth stays on. But my friends, I really think that the world now is beginning to realize that the persecuted exile Jacobs always dreamt and lived with angels of God within it. I wish to quote, as I did last week to the few that were here, from a recent meeting where one of the cardinals of Europe spoke, and I quote, he was speaking in the celebration of the 5th anniversary of the Vatican Council. The question, he says, is not how Judaism relates to us, but how we relate to Judaism. The difference is crucial. There is and there will be forever only one people of God, the Jewish people. And our exceeding joy is that we have been brought near to them in this age. We have lived for centuries in a spiritual and intellectual swindle, and it's time that we repent. I recently attended a Jewish Baptist conference in Wake Forest just a few weeks ago. And the conference, my friends, was attended by such men as James Scales, the president of Wake Forest, Brooks Hayes, Rabbi Mark Tenenbaum of the American Jewish Committee, Eric Myers of Duke University, Luther Copeland, president and head of the Baptist Seminary in Wake Forest, Carolina, Rabbi Richard Israel, the famous rabbi of the B'nai B'rith. of the Hillel Institute at Yale University. These were no small men that were there. And the conference centered around two themes. First, how they as Baptists are being persecuted, just as we as Jews, and I never knew this. They are being persecuted in Russia. 12 Baptists are being put on trial in Russia, for they went around preaching the gospel. And they're being persecuted along with the Jews. Oh, indeed, they admitted that they lived only to baptize others to their fold. But the scholars said how wrong they were, and this has already been stopped for years, and this will go on being stopped. They admitted indeed that the Jewish people are something that we should look up to and be proud of, to transcend their belief in their Jesus and that ours disbelief. In fact, one stood up and gave such a passionate story. There were tears coming out of everyone that was there, that Brooks Hayes stood up and said it's okay for everyone to cry, even adults. And he told the story that he, as a Baptist minister, led a group of Baptists to Israel on a pilgrimage. And as he was visiting with the kibbutz, which was part of their itinerary, someone came over to him and asked him if he's the leader of this Baptist group, and he said indeed he was. And he said, the leader of our kibbutz would like to see you, and being that he was Christian in this Israel land, he was a little feared, a little ashamed, a little worried, a little different. We can understand how that feels. And he came into this leader, and the leader stood up and he said, are you a Baptist? And he said, yes. And then the leader of the kibbutz, by the way, he described him so carefully with a scar on his face that he received during the war of 1948. And he said, I wish to honor you and salute you. Please sit down and let me tell you a story. And he told him a story. He told him that in the little city of Poland where he lived, his father knew that the Germans would soon be coming and what the result of the Jews living there would be, and so he told his children and planned with them that if the Germans do knock at their door, how each one should escape. And he told them. And one night there was a knock on the door, and every child ran out of the bedroom windows into the woods nearby. And after 1 day and 2 days and 3 days, this child, being hungry and not knowing what to do, listened to what his father told him and said, if ever you have need of anyone, there is one farmer, a man with a beard, he is a Baptist. To him you can go. Him you can trust. Do not trust anyone else. And he went to this Baptist home and knocked on the door, and he described the way the door opened up, and this man with the beard saw the child, and the child in hunger said, I am Jewish, and my father told me to come to you when I am running. And this man took him in and held him close, and he said, thank God that I can help a son of Israel come into my home. And he fed him and clothed him and hid him in the tyranny of the Nazi era. And now he stands there and he says, I pay honor to you as a Baptist minister, for it was the Baptist that saved me. He described it so beautifully, there were tears everywhere. And indeed, one rabbi got up and said afterwards that in Israel, in the same place where the ashes of the Jews are being burnt, in the sense of memorializing Yad Vashem, there is also a list of all the Christians that saved, gave their lives and gave them moments and opportunities and fear of their own families to save the Jews. Among them, I'm certain, are some Baptists of Poland. But there were other questions that were raised. The question that your rabbi asked. Did the Baptists indeed speak from their pulpits to the lay people? The love that we have for the land of Israel, that is not just a place where prophets walked, as to the Christians, or a place where Jesus was born, but to us Jews it is life and heart of our faith. And one of them stood up who said, 10 out of my 22 years I have spent in the land of Israel, professor of Hebrew at Wake Forest. He said, I was privileged to be in the land of Israel 12 years, or 10 out of his 22 years. And he said, indeed, we are speaking and letting our people know what this land means. And it was the Baptists who first proclaimed to the world that Israel indeed must live, and the Arabs were wrong. But he said we are not doing enough, and he admitted that. We ended this first session with a resolution to be published by the Baptists sent to Russia, linking a protest of persecution of the Baptist and the Jewish people, and vice versa. The second theme of this religious session was a deal with religion in general on this world. Quite an interesting theme indeed. And I've got to relate this to you. My friends, we are living in a world where there's a third world out there. 2/3 of the population of our world are Africans and Asians, wherein the Western pattern of religion means nothing to them. The Western biblical concept is being challenged, that religious tradition are in ancient and on the auction block. In this third world, they know nothing about this Western biblical tradition that we as Jews or even as Christians have. And they are now coming into form, new nations, new societies. They're not backward people in the jungles anymore. They're coming out, and what do we have to relate to them? Our faith is on the auction block to them, to the scientific world and to the Russian world. And I speak now for a moment of the scientific world because we had them there. A recent convocation with the United Presbyterian Church on Judaism and Christianity, their views of science and technology. At Princeton University, a group of quite impressive academic, scientific, and technological community were present. And one scientist that was involved in the Jonas Salk Institute of Biophysics, it won't be long. We can control color and sex, the mental attitude, the physiques of people. They are aware of being able to literally be playing God. And it became to them a question of what to do morally. Another scientist spoke of a camera that exists today. We don't even know about it. That could be placed within a truck and driven near your home. And the camera could see through by a laser beam of some sort into your home and hear every word of your conversation.